All right, thank you guys for being here. We were talking, surprised at the turnout, to be completely honest. This is the last session. All of you get a star for being here, making the most of your conference experience. So excited to talk today about the dual workforce, single institution, building teams in the age of AI. It's gonna be a 40-minute session. That's a little tough for me because I'm a Duke professor. My shortest class is 2 hours and 40 minutes, but I promise you, we will not do that to you today. That will not happen. Our safe harbor statement, which I think you've seen 10,000 times while you've been at the conference. So, we have to do it as a public company. So that is here for us. So in terms of the people that you have here, you have me, John Fimble, who is a professor at Duke. I also advise here a little bit at nCino here and there. We got Jim Marous here, who runs a podcast and does some amazing things in the world of finance. And then we have Will Jung, who is our CTO. So excited to have the three of us on this session today. So in terms of where we're going, I always like to let people know where we're going, with the overall presentation. So we're going to first talk about some of the current feelings in the press that are on AI and how people are feeling. I will tell you to get your cell phones out because we're going to have a Menti poll. So as you can expect, I come from academia. I kind of like data and leveraging data to inform opinions versus just having some random anecdote or story. So anyways, get your cell phones ready because we will have a couple questions for you. Then we're going to define what is the dual workforce, because there's a little bit of chatter out in the system and there's different people talking about it in different ways. But today we'll define that for you. And then, talking a little bit about how we've been here before in terms of various different innovation cycles and what that means for the future as we kind of continue. And then the real goal is hey, how can I take things from today and bring them back into my institution? And really, we want to give you the cheat code of how to be able to leverage the dual workforce in the most efficient and effective way for your various different institutions. So that's a little bit about where we're going. Talk a little bit about current feelings on AI. So, there's a lot out in the marketplace that I would say is clickbait because, hey, what sells? Fear and anxiety sells, right? Unfortunately, right? I'm a big hopeful guy and a joyful guy, but hey, there's not as much of that in the press these days. But here are some quotes that are out there from people who have done some, pretty amazing things out in the marketplace to date, saying some pretty provocative things about AI, which stirs, I think, fear and anxiety in a number of different folks. I have a viewpoint on what I'm seeing in university, but would love to kick it over here to Jim and Will to talk a little bit about how you're seeing the various different kind of pulse in the marketplace and in industry, that may be divergent or maybe aligned with these various different quotes that you see here.
Well, I think it's interesting. It's in the banking industry, but in all industries. You mentioned about the fact that this is clickbait, and it is. Just read something last week that said that when organizations such as Meta, Google, any of these major institutions say they're laying off or they're going to get rid of 10,000, 5,000, 20,000 employees because of AI, that is to make the shareholders really happy because that means they're going to be generating revenues and cutting costs and all this. The reality in most cases is they're not laying off those people. They're just not refilling positions. And that's down deep in the guidance on what's going on. And that's happening across the galaxy right now. And it is really, especially in banking, something that organizations right now are not in the position to actually let go of people until they figure out the playing field. And I think also what we're seeing is, as we're going to be talking about the rest of the day, is it's becoming a dual workforce. It's relieving some people of mundane work that has cost to it but no high benefit, and replacing it with people's ability to scale up. And real quickly, I've done this before. How many of you have any fear at all that your job could be replaced by AI? And be truthful here. We're not looking, okay, we have a couple of truthful people. Come on. I do a podcast and I'm worried about getting replaced by AI. I keep on saying, AI, don't replace me. But I think it's a starting place. It says your employees definitely are concerned. So every time you talk about a digital initiative or an AI initiative, all they hear in their mind is, they're looking for my job. What have you seen?
Yeah, I would agree. It's funny because I know some of the companies that these gentlemen own are actually hiring more today as well. So it's interesting because in the engineering field, in technology, there's more engineering jobs out there than there were before. There's more hiring happening. Maybe different types of roles, so I find that interesting. The other thing I would say as well, again, from a technology perspective, if you look at the recent announcements from Anthropic, OpenAI with their joint ventures and the new consulting companies coming out in terms of deploying AI and actually getting into adoption with other enterprises, they're hiring more people. Google came out with the FDE team, the forward deploy engineering. So I think the type of jobs are potentially changing and are changing because of the technology. Whether it's going to completely replace humans, no, I'm doubtful.
I am too.
Yeah, indeed. I think in the university experience, we have people that are wide-eyed and super hopeful, have not been cynical just yet, being kind of beat down by society, but they are really leveraging AI in everything that they do. And at Duke, we are very AI native and encourage it with some parameters, which we will actually get to a little bit today because not all of my students use those parameters, unfortunately. But anyways, want you to get out your phones real quick because this is where we're going to have a quick poll for you to kind of answer some questions that we have here. So switching over to this first one, on a scale from 1 to 10, how concerned are you about AI affecting your early career job prospects or just this was the question that I did for Duke, but what we're looking at for here is just your career prospects and your job on a scale of 1 to 10. All right, we got some results coming in. Okay. Looking good. All right. Okay. All right. I think this is quite in line with what we saw at Duke. I think people are really in the middle, kind of a normal distribution. Like, I don't know, I'm a little fearful, I'm not fearful, like really fearful, but then they hear all these mass layoffs and whatnot. But sometimes these mass layoffs would have been done, but they would have blamed something else other than AI, as Jim and I have talked about from time to time. So this one definitely aligns to what we were seeing at Duke because we were right in the middle with our students' results. Let's go to the next quick poll question. How are you currently positioning yourself for a workforce increasingly shaped by AI? A couple responses you can do here. All right, we've got a pretty big cluster here of learning AI tools. That was what we were seeing at Duke. We had 38% really in the learning AI tools space. I would say in that particular piece, I've had to advise my students because some of the newest tools come out and a lot of them are like super sexy and super fun. And like there was a pretty big press article about the one that would turn any photo into an oil canvas, but it was collecting all of your visual data and then your family data too, in terms of like, hey, are you married? Are you not married? Do you have kids? All these sorts of things. So I always give people a word of caution when adopting new AI tools. Make sure there's parameters and be careful what sort of data that you're actually giving it. But this is very much in line with what I saw at Duke. Why don't we go to the next poll question as well? In terms of how confident do you feel in your ability to work effectively alongside AI tools? All right, we've got very confident, somewhat confident. Okay. Well, this is mirroring Duke's results quite a bit. We were 50% confident at Duke and somewhat confident in Duke. So this is pretty close. We've got a little bit here in the room of not really. All right, let's go to the last question here that we have in the Menti poll. What excited you most about AI in the workplace? Okay, got some responses coming in here. Increased productivity took an early lead, but then ability to focus more on meaningful work. Okay. This goes a little bit different from the student results. The student results were more We're definitely aligned on the ability to focus more on meaningful work, but a lot of them are pivoting to entrepreneurship and thinking about how to create disruptive technologies on their own in small groups. So that's why I'd say it was a little bit divergent there. All right, well, let's move on. I also asked my students, if we moved back to the slides, how do you think AI will change your career path? And so I'm not going to read these quotes to you, but you kind of see some of the things that they're thinking about, whether I'm a software engineer and this is going to make my life easier because there's going to be, I'll be able to write more code as a software engineer. I'm going to be able to do more data-driven decisions, all these sorts of things you kind of see on this page. And then I had one student, who decided to use AI for their actual response to my AI survey. I was a little surprised that they did this, but I will say this student wasn't completely lazy because I often get AI assignments submitted to me that have been completely done with AI. They at least removed the M dash. So cheat code for you out there, if you're doing anything for your bosses, I can tell if you give me the little emojis of the rocket or the little target, okay, you did ChatGPT. If the colors are really messed up, you're Claude, right? Just do a little extra work, okay? But anyways, it's a small cheat code. But I just find this funny because I tell my students, like I tell my kids when they do something that's not intelligent, I'm like, use your brain. And I think it's really important for students or people in the workforce, how do you use AI in an intelligent way that builds upon, some critical thinking that is done as the first actual step before just going to it? Because I think too many times people are just outsourcing their brain and their work to AI, and you get this sort of response, and it is a response, but is it valuable, right? And so I'm seeing that, and I'm trying to call that out because I have a foot in, obviously, academia and industry to avoid AI slop to put us in a better position, but interested to see what you guys think and what you're seeing kind of in this particular phase, because obviously, we're integrating a lot of AI and Claude at nCino, and how you think about this, how you approach this from an organizational standpoint, and how to avoid this.
Yeah, so we have seen this. I've seen this a lot. So one of the things I've told our product and engineering org, so we've got a global org, about 500 people on product and engineering across various countries. Similar, I said, don't outsource your thinking. So I think that's going to be key. Sounds very simple, but don't outsource your thinking. Make sure that you're using AI and understand what it does for you, right? So we have had, in the initial days, the early days, what I found was I had someone generate, AI is very verbose. It's verbose both in the words here, if you do documentation, but code as well is very verbose. And so we found our good engineers or our directors spending more time reviewing, because I'm just getting a lot. So early days, I was getting sent all these, I've got this great idea, there's this great business case, and I'll get sent a document made from Claude, and I spend a lot of time, so I put it back into Claude to summarize it for me, and then it gets all mixed up, right? So I think it's key, right? And understanding what it can and can't do for you is really important. You need to control it. You need to understand, the problem. You need to be very specific about it. The context matters, right? The more specific you are with AI, the better it is for you as well, right? And I think just using it in that way but it takes reps. So I think not trying it is probably worse, but now trying it, but now knowing actually how to harness it and use it, right?
And we've done a few research studies on agentic AI and AI in banking, and the most recent ones scare me a little bit because we're in the banking industry and we're afraid to go where no man or woman has gone before. And so we spend a lot of time on AI with risk and fraud, which it should be. But where we get into trouble is we're spending a whole lot of time on efficiency and effectiveness as opposed to the customer experience. We're keeping it in the back office, which makes it so there's less risk from the financial institution getting exposed, but there's a lack of opportunity. You only can cut costs so far and actually gain any value. And that's why a lot of the measurement tools are not showing high value to the implementation that are being done by AI. We have got to change our risk models to allow us to have risk tolerance and risk management as opposed to risk avoidance, which when I got into banking 5 decades ago, it was all about risk avoidance from the point of view of even being a teller, making sure you balance to the penny every night, one way or the other. And the reality is we have to get out of our comfort zones as institutions. And it's no longer about digital transformation. It was said yesterday in the keynote, we're really getting transformation towards AI. And to do so, and to leverage all the skill sets, we have to move into the customer experience, the application of data, the getting beyond the pilot stage to actually the implementation stage. Right now we have an implementation gap and confined areas only, and we're not going to the way it can be best revenue generation from the standpoint of using data to build insights, to deploy in the marketplace to get results that the customer wants. And we talked about it yesterday that the consumer right now knows what can be done, and they know what's being done outside of banking. They want banking to be as smart or smarter than what they're doing with their other tools that they use. They want the GPS of financial services where they can actually deploy and help the consumer see what the path ahead is. They are really tired of the rear view, mirror view that they only get when they get in mistakes and they're getting no guidance. My Aura Ring does more for me on a health basis than my bank does from a financial basis. I wake up, anybody have some kind of health ring? We all know when we go first in the morning, we now pick up our phone and say, what was our sleep score? Even though we kind of know where it's going to be. But the reality is it's not about a score. It's about what it tells us to do to improve it. That's what the consumer wants. So they want more than just slop. They want it to be focused on their efforts. And what we're going to see is this is going to come about very quickly. And nCino showed it yesterday. They're building the tools to make it so you can go outside of your comfort zone, beyond COBOL, and into the real experience of the consumer. But we have to take leadership in doing so.
No, I couldn't agree more. It's really important to make those various different pivots in your business in a smart and intelligent way. In terms of like what we mean by the dual workforce, it's probably obvious by now, but I think it's important to just define it for the purpose of today's talk, because it is a term that's been coined in the past. You know, McKinsey kind of coined it as, you know, we have full-time employees and we have contractors, right? And then you've heard from the World Economic Forum kind of the analog workforce versus the digital workforce. But really what we're thinking about today is the Venn diagram of you've got, you know, experienced legacy industry professionals that are working currently in industry, and then you have these new entry-level folks that are now entering your workforce, and then you have AI in the middle, right? And how do you work with seamlessly across both of those to make the most of the experience, but then also make the most of the new skills and new ways of thinking that a lot of these folks are coming from straight out of college to actually do. And I know, Will, you have been thinking about this quite a lot, and want to kick it over to you to get some of your thoughts as you think about this at nCino and more broadly.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? So, I mean, going back to Jim's point about customer experience, we're all building institutions or products and services or this technology for who? For people. But we forget about the actual people outcomes and focus on the technology and technology replacing people, et cetera. So I think that's a fundamental thing that we need to remember. And if we think about the roles of people versus agents, if you think about how organizations are structured, we're structured based on the technology of today, right? And the processes. Process really is like the gap filler between what your people can do and what technology can give you, right? And then we fill the gap with process, and then we design organizations around it. That's how you end up with silos in your organizations. I'm sure none of you have silos in your organization, but a lot of others do, right? And so because of that, if the technology has fundamentally shifted, then you need to understand, okay, then what are our processes, right, between the technology and what do our people need to learn? What new skills they need to learn, right? So if you think about it, your people really should be the ones with the judgment, the ambiguity, right, and the uncertainty, the relationship side of banking. We can finally actually deliver on the promise of personalized banking, of relationship banking, right? We actually learn from experience, and there's accountability. My favorite quote is, a computer cannot be accountable at the end of the day, right? There is a human that is always accountable. And that accountability then needs to come back to a human. And so you need to structure your organization along that. AI is great. It's great at, I always say it's a great pattern recognition matcher at scale, right? Does your mundane work and execution at scale, learns from masses of data that we could never learn from, right? It's tireless, it works 24/7, great, but it doesn't give you the things on the left side that your people do. Now, the interesting part here is your senior and junior bankers, because then if AI is really then taking away all of the mundane and the friction of the work, how are your junior bankers going to learn? Because that's how we used to learn, right? I was in banking, I learned through spreadsheets. I learned how to spread, right? I learned how to look at financials and actually do analysis. I actually did like a balance sheet accounting I had a book that does balance sheet, right? With your P&L and your debits and credits, right? So how do you actually then train your junior analysts to actually develop that judgment and taste that the senior bankers do, right? And I think that's going to be the interesting, homework for us as an industry, both on the banking and technology side.
And let's take a case study. We see it in the call center easily, where a lot of organizations are using AI to answer the simple questions and then giving the call officer or the calling person a little bit more time than 3 minutes per call allowability. But let's see in the commercial space. A commercial calling officer that can, if given the data and the analytic capability, can have on their phone, very much like the woman from WAFED talked about yesterday at her organization, where on their phone they have the tools to go into a prospect and actually give them more information about their organization than they have themselves. That is an amazing tool. If I was a calling officer, that would be so exciting that I can take all these AI tools, take data from the outside and inside, bring it to the resource, to the prospect or client I'm trying to work with, and help solve their problems and be the hero in their eyes. But it takes a couple things that we aren't currently giving at most institutions. Number one, is your data in good shape? Number two, are you democratizing the data and insights? In other words, does everybody in your organization have an AI tool that can help them do their job better from the point of view from a teller to the point of view from a calling officer to an executive, understanding their organization, as was Sean was talking about yesterday, that he's doing. The reality is you got to get the basics right. And I'll tell you what, this session won't be here next year, because you're all going to have already figured it out, how the AI and human works together. We're going to be giving more and more case studies, because the industry is moving so quickly that we've got to allow our data to talk to our people and to give them the tools to be better at what they would have done by themselves and are working around the corner to do it now. When I talked to the woman from WAFE yesterday, I realized, I said, what are your best calling officers doing? She goes, they're thinking on their own beyond what I'm giving them, to say, how can I use other AI tools to ramp up so I'm better than my peers? This is going to happen in your organization, but you've got to open the doors to data and insights so they are given the ability to be their best client service person.
Yeah, no, that's a great example that you have there. Will, what would you say in how this looks like at the banks that we're seeing here at nCino?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that Jim's point is the data, right? And I think it's contextual data at the right moment in time. And so when an RM's on the road, they need to be on the road with their customers and understand that they need that data and that fingertips, right? And the right data in terms of, hey, what was my previous client interaction? All right, what was their portfolio look like from a credit history perspective? Have we done a credit review? Like all of that automated and being at the fingertips. And then from a client perspective, Jim was opining about how the financial institutions weren't giving you the service that you wanted, right? The RM can actually deliver that. I actually know you. I'm not asking for information that I already should know about you, right? If I've got your transactional data, your transactional banking, I know your credit history, I actually know the macroeconomic factors impacting your sector that you're in or you're banking in, right? So all those things should be available to you too, right? But a lot of times today, our bankers, we actually get them to spend time operating the system rather than the system helping them to do that. So when bankers do this, or institutions do this correctly, and they're using AI as that tool to help, right, and that dual workforce component, a lot of that is the system's actually giving the insights proactively, right, rather than reactively. So that rather than working the system's working for them. I think that's a real flip.
Well, also, if you're a digitally mature organization, you've gone well beyond turning paper into clicks. And the reality is most of us in the room are still trying to make it more efficient, make it so we can take all the paper that take a commercial loan or any type of loan and make it so you can do all the ingredients through digital. We're not there yet as an industry, but the best organizations, those that are most mature, are well beyond just taking paper and making it PDFs or making it digital. They're actually applying this knowledge. And they're focusing on asking the questions as opposed to simply delivering the answers.
100%. And I think that it's what's real important is always looking at history kind of as a guide, right? Because we've been here before in different ways. Now, does this innovation cycle look different than some of the other innovation cycles that we've seen? Of course, right? And I think there's been a number of innovation cycles that we've seen over the course of time. You know, originally you had the loom, right? And then you had the movement from like, hey, we're going to be in a horse and a carriage to an automobile. And then all of us remember the spreadsheet revolution that we saw. And then we saw the internet actually come on scene, right? And so we've seen these things, and there are things to be learned about these innovation cycles, right? And to put like a finer point on this, we've also seen this within finance, right? There's been so many different things that have happened over the course of time that a number of us in the room have lived through that we've seen, right? You've seen the plastic revolution, you've seen deregulation, right? You've seen the internet, you've seen the crisis, right? You've seen the fintech decade, right? We've all kind of seen these particular things, and it follows, like, I'm a big fan of the Gartner hype cycle, which we'll talk about in a minute, but it really follows that overall life cycle that we typically see. But would love your all's thoughts, because like obviously this is moving quite fast, but some of these other things have moved really, really fast too. So would love your thoughts on how you see the AI as it relates to some of these other things that we've seen in finance to date.
Real quick comment is fast followers are no longer a place to be, even though you want to be on the cusp. The reality is, if you look at the previous slides of this one, you'll see that all those different revolutions were more and more compressed. Look at the time lapse between one and the other. We're seeing change happening faster than ever before, and we're never going to see it happening this slowly again. So you got to get on that train right now, because catching up gets harder tomorrow, gets even harder the day after, and we got to push ourselves to actually move to where it's going as opposed to where it's been.
I would agree. Like the pace of change is probably, I know we say this all the time, unprecedented.
Yeah.
All right. If I just think about agents, agentic, we think agents have been around for a long time. I mean, the industry's been talking about it for about 12, 18 months. Opus 4.6 in December 25 was really when agents could become autonomous. And that's for those technical folks from the model perspective. But that's only, what, 5, 6 months ago? And now we're expecting, so how are you doing it in enterprise scale? Well, we all are doing it at the same time. So I think that pace of change is so crazy at the moment. To Jim's point, I think that there is no time to actually fall behind. There is no fast forward. It's just we have to get on the bandwagon now.
Couldn't agree more. And this is like the typical Gartner life cycle that you see here. And what Jim was alluding to is really there is a lot of money to be had in kind of this innovators and early adoption stage. That is really where you want to be. Obviously, you can be part of the early majority too. There is also money to be lost if you're too early to the party, and we've seen some banks be that way. But really want to encourage you to be in that early adopter stage is really, really critical in terms of a cheat code for AI and how you're thinking about your institution and your dual workforce. And I mean, to that extent, Gartner actually put out like, hey, here's our hype cycle, and this is actually where AI is on this particular piece. And, you know, Will, I know you're, you know, breathing and eating this stuff daily, so would love any thoughts that you have as you see this particular Gartner life cycle on AI and some of the things you're seeing.
Yeah, so I think a lot of institutions are at the peak of inflated expectations, especially at this C level and board level.
Yeah, fair.
All right, I'm sure all executives say we need AI everywhere. And then there's people who are executing and probably at the trough of disillusionment, right? Going, hey, this is actually harder than we actually thought. Where I actually see our industry is we're probably getting to that slope of enlightenment. And the reason I say that is you actually need to go through that cycle to really learn so that you can actually reap the benefits of that slope of enlightenment, right? To your point, the early adopters are probably going through that trough of disillusionment the first, but then they're coming out the other side now already.
We talked about it yesterday. I don't like the AI hype cycle anymore. I think it's the AI reality cycle.
Fair.
I think we no longer going to be talking about those who are fast or slow, those who are succeeding or not succeeding. I really believe it's an issue of survival. I've had now 5 conversations in the last 3 weeks where somewhere in the conversation didn't come up the comment that we're going to see the biggest consolidation of the financial service industry that we've ever seen. Now, I'm not the sky is falling kind of guy. I've never been Chicken Little. I've never believed in trying to project what the future of branches or another thing are going to be. But I think the definition of the winners, the losers, survivors, the ones who are acquired, the acquire or be acquired, as Al Dominic would have said at Cornerstone, it's really going to be defined by your ability to keep up and stay ahead with AI. We don't have a digital transformation. That term is not only cliche, it's old. And it's really going to be about where are you on the hype reality curve, or the AI reality curve, not the hype reality. That's a little bit of everything. But yeah, you can be on that one. But I think it's a matter of survival now.
Yeah. And I think like now the question is like, how do we actually build this? How do we operationalize this within our business? Because there is the operational component, there's the people component, and there's the change management component, right? And I think Will and Jim, you've kind of seen both of this, and Will want you to kind of talk a little bit about how you see all of that and how we should be thinking about that operationally, technically, change management wise, et cetera.
Yeah, and I think the slide explains it really well. Is think about, yes, these are tools if you think of it from one perspective, but really think about the job to be done, right? A lot of times in the corporate world, we've created jobs based on tasks, right? If your job is based on a task, it will be automated, AI or not, right? We just haven't got to it yet. So but your job is based on accountability, influence, impact, right? That is the job that you need to actually anchor around, and then design the tooling around that, right? And I think that's going to be really important. So as you see on the slide there, right, in terms of a credit analyst, have an AI agent that actually goes, okay, what is the job to be done for credit, right? And that's managing credit risk for your customers and for the bank, right? And then go down, drill down a layer deeper and go, okay, what are the tasks that they're doing that AI can actually do that the human doesn't need to do anymore? So I think you need to be quite methodical in that way. And this is almost as much as an organizational and operational transformation as much as a technology one, right? If you don't do that, and if you just slap technology on top of your current operating process, you're just going to make the slower horse faster. You're still going to get a horse, right? To use the Henry Ford example. You're not going to need a car anymore. So I think that's going to be really important.
I think there's a pragmatic aspect to this too. I came into banking a way long time ago in a management training program that they put me in the institution and said, okay, you have a 3-year rotation. You're going to learn about different areas of the bank and see how we do things. That is the most backward way we could possibly act right now. And if your organization is hiring people that have the skills and you're placing them to learn how the financial institution does things and don't put them at the lead of a department that is the most behind of any of yours, you're not using the resources that have been given to you. I think, you talk about your students. They're not coming out there saying, oh, I want to be a data analyst. I want to work behind the scenes as a data analyst. No, they want to be front and center. And I think we can only leverage the skills that we have that we can buy in the marketplace today or partner with organizations that can bring it with you, but you got to give them the bandwidth to be able to do so. And you talked about the foundation level. If you don't know what your North Star is, if you don't know what your institution is going to be a year and 2 years down the road and in the future, you aren't going to be in the right place to start. You're just going to be hiring to fix the jobs that are still being done, as you said. Rethinking the same thing, but putting PDFs into the paper mill. It's not going to work. So make sure you give the people you partner with or the people you train the bandwidth to be able to succeed. And that goes along with training people internally. We're seeing some great training programs done. One of the companies I really like a lot about the way they handle the people aspect is Synovus. I've worked with them quite a bit, and I realized the way they manage people, the way they communicate internally, the way they make sure that everybody has the ability to be empowered is something we could all model against. There's a lot of other institutions, but it gets down to leadership. If you don't have the leadership, you don't have the North Star, and you don't give the people the bandwidth to succeed, they will not succeed no matter how good the person is that you hired.
Yeah, and I think training is going to be really important in this era of the dual workforce because I think you really have to train for judgment, like this slide says, so that people have that context to make the most use of the tools together. And in this dual workforce, you've got that experience, and then you've got these folks who are early career professionals, and you really need to have that interchange between the two of them on AI to make sure that you aren't getting slop and you're getting things that are actually, usable. But I know we're getting short on time, but one thing I wanted to make sure that we got to was how to think about your infrastructure as it relates to the dual workforce with AI. Would love, Will, I know you've architected this and helped us at nCino, but would love you to talk a little bit about this.
Yeah, I mean, we're in a regulated industry, right? And for customers, trust is everything for us as well, and same for your customers. So governance and auditability is going to be really important. We had obviously regulators come and talk to us as well about this. It's really, and every action that you use for AI needs a purpose. And when you have that purpose and you have that auditability coming around it, so that's really big. And governance is going to be, I think, going to be a differentiator. A lot of people think of risk management as like an anchor. I actually think you can flip that, right? If you think of risk management, it can be a differentiator for you. If you make risk management a lot easier for your internal teams, that's going to show up in your customer experience. The banking specific context is really important because, again, the system of context, AI is only as good as the context that you give it. And the operational context that you have, and for the customers on nCino, that you have on nCino, is context that's actually not documented anywhere else. But those data points that you've got on nCino, on a platform, or wherever your system context might be, is going to be critical, right? Because, again, depending on your industry, the country that you operate in, the loans that you give, the lending requirements, the regulation requirements, the compliance, they're all different. Right? And that context all together provides that context, right? And I think that's going to be really specific and important, and that will actually make AI useful. And last bit is production proven at scale. You need to think about your data governance. You need to think about your data sovereignty. You need to think about your data lineage. So data is going to be one. Your security is going to be another one. Your scalability is going to be another one, and operationability, right? And so all of those things, which you think about it, are core, really, I would say, enterprise architecture considerations are going to be even more important. So if you don't have those foundations right, then AI is just going to expose that a lot more, right? And I think that's going to be really important. And so for us in nCino, that's how we think about it. And so when we, provide these solutions to our customers, we are thinking in the same way that we feel that you should think about it, right? Because we believe that we need to provide you a service and a product that's actually going to help you get there as well. So that's how we're thinking about it right now.
Yeah. Nothing to add to that, so you can go on.
Yeah. So I think as you think about in terms of things to take back, I think there is a macro and a micro. And I think the macro is we've alluded to it over the course of this conversation, is look, change is always going to happen. You need to be comfortable with change. And you don't need to be asking the question hey, well, what if AI takes my job? You should say how can AI take my job? Because you're going to want to be able to understand what pivots you should be making in your current job, your current procedures, your current processes, be taking that to the team, be forward looking in how you're thinking about that, because all of our jobs are going to pivot over time in this dual workforce, particular environment. So, over the course of time, it's always the people that pivot that end up rising to the top, whether that's in athletics or whether that's in industry or whether that's in academia. We see that over and over again. But Will, I know you kind of had some of these more micro level things that you wanted some folks to take away with too. So want to, pass it on to you.
Yeah, as it says, look at your workflows. Look at how work is being processed today. Where's the highest friction, all right? And I think hopefully over the past week, you've got a more understanding of what AI can actually do within a banking context, right? So really look at those workflows where it can help and just get started, right? And I think that's going to be important. You need to, it's as much as a people change management, so you need to show the early wins. So if you wait for this grand reveal, right, I think you're always going to be behind. So start with that. Intentional pairing, I think that, again, is going to be important. So there's a technology component of this, right? But from a people component, it's showing to your people, we're not about replacing you. We actually want to supercharge you, right? So how are we going to supercharge it and have that intentional pairing, right? Your judgment is important. We value you, right, in terms of what you bring to the organization, but we think you can do so much better with the tooling that we give you. So be intentional about that, right? And then have an honest conversation with vendors. You should ask about the governance that your vendors are providing to you on AI. How does the data lineage work? How does the scalability work? What's your DR? These are all questions that your security teams, right, and your vendor management, your third-party risk teams will be asking, and we get asked those questions, but you should be asking them even more now upfront, right? Because I think it's going to be really important because AI, because it's so real-time, my security team at the moment is working 24/7 because of AI, right? And so because of that, you should be thinking to your vendors and holding them to the high standards, right? So have those tough conversations upfront.
I think it's interesting that Elon Musk said it really well, saying you're only as good and as fast as your lowest performing vendor or partner or division of your company. That's just theory towards SpaceX, and that's why they continually can evolve so quickly. I mean, you get one rocket up, it may not work, the next one goes up next week, which is kind of crazy. And I can see that in banking. But the reality is, continually evaluate your vendors, see if they can work well together, because this is an overarching organizational thing. This is not a departmental item that you have to deal with. Secondly, make sure they're ahead of the curve and that you're going to go faster because of them, because if not, they're going to hold you back. Third, do they have the same North Star you have? And I think fourth, are they listening? Because if your vendor is not listening to what you need and evolving themselves based on what you're saying, I think I talked to Sean yesterday, and he said, we're learning as much from our clients as we're teaching our clients. That the evolution, what you're doing in the back office, is usually prompted by your best performing clients that are saying, I need to have this. You're going, okay, let's develop that. So.
Yeah, no, and I'd say we're out of time now, but obviously remember this takes time, and Will alluded this too, take some chances, right? You're not gonna get it right the first time, but take some chances, evolve, and put yourself out there, because if you wait, you'll get lapped. But anyways, all of us will be around, the three of us will be around if you have any questions that you wanna talk to us, and also remember to rate the session, so. Anyways, that's it. But thank you guys so much for joining. We really appreciate you being here for the last session of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.